Squid Game Season 3 just dropped, the final season. Is it good? It's got some great moments. The ending is one of the worst endings I've ever seen to a series. You know, when an ending to a show is actually so disappointing, it makes you realize the hours you've wasted putting into a show. That was pretty much this. Now, it's been close to a year since Squid Game Season 2 came out, so there is a lot to catch up on. And don't worry, Netflix has you covered there because you were probably on your phone. There's a huge recap that goes all over Season 2. Now, I thought Season 3 would do some kind of like cringe time jump or something like that because Season 2 ended on a bit of a cliffhanger. If you remember, there was a rebellion and it didn't go too well. Well, Season 3 begins pretty much when that rebellion failed. Like, it begins the moment Season 2 ends. Pretty much all of Ji-hun's revolutionaries are killed, the people that tried to, you know, break the system of the Squid Game. Now, it's really obvious what they've tried to do here, which so many shows do, is, you know, they'll have Season 1, 2, 3, 4, but the final season, they actually split it up into 2 parts. I mean, honestly, even Breaking Bad did this. You had like Season 5A and then Season 5B. There's a lot of reasons for this. There's more ground to cover, there's more stories to talk about, and also because it's technically 2 different seasons, they can apply for Emmys twice. But even the creator of the show came out saying that he wanted to have like 1 big season, but there was just too much going on, so it's split into 2 seasons. That's why, like, for example, Season 1 is 9 episodes, and Season 3 is only 6 episodes. It feels like they're kind of running out of things to talk about, but no, it was 1 season that was kind of, you know, split into 2. And that's also why Season 2, you might remember, nothing really happened that much. It was more kind of setting things in motion, and as soon as it got good, it ended. Well, Season 3 is meant to deliver on that. Now, one thing I found really distracting in the first couple of episodes, because it, you know, it has been the best part of a year since the last season, we needed a lot of callbacks. We needed to catch up the audience, because again, the Netflix audience, they're not the highest IQ individuals. They're usually on their phone during stuff like this. I mean, God, even Netflix themselves have literally admitted that they are making like casual viewing shows because they know you're not watching it. You're probably doing some kind of chore. The thing is, these callbacks wouldn't be a problem if they did actually end up just making it 1 long season. I think most people here would agree. I would happily wait after the ending of Season 1 of Squid Game to have Season 2, for there to be more going on, for it to be longer and 1 continuous season. But again, I feel this is more like a Netflix executive choice where it's like, you know, we need to keep everyone's dopamine. They're gonna forget about Squid Game in a year. We need to get something out now. I mean, dude, you go onto Netflix right now, what's the most watched program in America? Like Poop Cruise. It was literally the entire story is like a cruise ship that like it had poop on it. Wow. So what do Americans watch, bro?
And then the lights go out.
I would never expect having to poop in a red bag.
Oh no.
Also, we've had a restock of merch. We've got caps, tees, hoodies, all of it linked down in the description. Now, like I said, the rebellion at the end of Season 2, it was completely doomed, and Ji-hun, you kind of expected him to be the only survivor. Also, I know it's Gi-hun, not Ji-hun. It's a British thing, sorry. Now, for the first couple of episodes, Gi-hun actually doesn't take that much of a center focus. He's always been the protagonist of pretty much the entire show, especially in Season 1. But in Season 3, for the first couple episodes, he actually takes a bit of a backseat to focus on the other characters, mostly because, you know, his rebellion failed, and he's just really depressed and he's just sulking the entire time. So there's not really much you can do with a character like that. The only problem is, to focus on the side characters, you need some side characters, and a lot of them were killed off in Season 2. Like, for example, my boy, rest in peace, Thanos. Now, they redo the vote pretty early on. We know what's going to happen. They're going to stay in the Squid Game. I mean, bro, what else is going to happen? They all vote to leave, and then we spend Season 3 of them all coping with, like, PTSD. I mean, to be fair, I will give them credit there because they could have easily drawn that out for, like, a whole other episode, and we've only got 6 of them this season. Could you imagine just a whole episode of like, do we stay? But so many people have died. But the money's really, like, they skipped all that, thankfully, because it's like, bro, this is like the 4th time we're doing this now. We also get some more scenes of the B story in Season 2. If you remember that story that everyone hated and it went nowhere, and it was just obviously set up all the investigators and detectives trying to find the island where the Squid Game is actually taking place. Like, you've got that ex-police officer who looks a bit like Mark Wahlberg if he was Korean. And also you might remember as well that woman soldier who wanted to protect the painter from Season 2. The guy who had a daughter, if you remember that there was a lot of plot threads. I feel like Season 2 had like 6 simultaneous plot threads, and Season 1, it was just about Gi-hun. Like, it was just so straightforward. Now, a lot of this first episode in Season 3, they're building up to the next game they're going to play. Because, again, like, this is technically 1 season originally. They've got 12 episodes to play with here, when Season 1 was only 9 episodes. So they end up playing, you know, another children's game, hide and seek. And the teams have decided through this kind of like gacha gumball machines, and each player gets a different colored ball. And as soon as you see the main characters get split up, like for example, Park Young-sik, the guy who's basically inseparable from his mother. You also have that pregnant lady as well, and her ex-boyfriend. They also get split up. Now, you just know when this happens, it is going to be bad. Like, they're obviously going to be put on opposing teams in some, like, deeply dark way. Like, this isn't just, like, volleyball or something. But I did notice, like, some of the shot composition here was, like, really whack. I don't know if it's just me, but, like, the way some of the characters were framed, it just felt really off. Now, again, this is coming from a YouTuber that has not studied film at all. I just make video essays that are just disgustingly overly long and probably just a plot summary with an analysis every hour or so. But there's not really a way that I can put into words how the framing is. It's just really strange. But despite that, they actually have one of the best shots in the episode while they're walking up to the next game. The bodies of the revolutionaries, you know, the people that tried to basically break down the Squid Game, they're actually all hung from a chandelier. And it's a really good show of force because remember, like, even though they failed the revolution, a lot of soldiers actually ended up dying. So, you know, the people that run the Squid Game, they're definitely a little bit weaker now. So they obviously did this as this kind of like display to trick them into thinking that they actually have less power than they have. Now, the second episode of Squid Game is probably one of my favorite in the entire series. It really is up there with like episode 6 from the first season. So, like I said, they're playing hide and seek, but they're actually given knives, and the seekers have the knives and they have to find people and basically kill them. That gives them the ability to leave the game. I think one of the best choices they made here is it isn't an open area where guards are watching to, you know, shoot you if you break the rules. The guards just aren't present because they know that the people here are now so desperate, they probably would kill other people just for a chance to get out of the game. So you've got these really tight, cramped corridors. You've got this ceiling as well with like stars and stuff, but it's obviously all just painted on and fake. And if anything, it really reminds me of like some of the original Alien films. And also one thing I noticed is this episode does not have a lot of dialogue. Usually in like the rec room or where they're waiting for a game or when they're in a game, there's loads of yapping, but most of this episode is actually pretty quiet. There is dialogue. There are some characters that yap. Like for example, that one guy that's basically lost his mind and he just loves killing people now because he was taking so many drugs that Thanos had in his locket. He basically just lost his mind, which by the way, he conveniently forgets about in this episode, leaves it on the floor and someone else finds it, which is very hard to believe when someone's completely hooked on this drug that they just leave it on accident. Now, if you know about chaos theory, it basically means everything that can go wrong will go wrong. Now, Gi-hun, this episode, he doesn't actually do a lot again, which is kind of disappointing. I get it. He's still getting over the trauma of like this failed revolution to break out of the Squid Game, but he's just kind of like walking around aura farming the entire episode, not really doing anything. But he does have a face-off with that psychic woman who was mocking him in the last episode, but he doesn't actually end up killing her. There's actually a lot of scenes where, you know, he kind of raises the knife as if to kill someone, but then he's like, wait, I can't do this. I'm the main character. I mean, if he did actually kill someone because he was that desperate, that would be like, oh, we've gone from like good boy protagonist to like anti-hero, possible villain. But obviously that never happens because we need like our golden boy for the series. He also spares the guy with the top knot as well, the guy who couldn't actually deliver the magazines in time, the gun magazines, because one of the reasons they failed the revolution is because they ran out of ammo. But surprisingly, eventually he does actually choke him out. But this was already after he had a kill. So killing this guy was basically just futile and if anything, just petty. And then Gi-hun actually does try to kill himself because he's just so racked with guilt, and then the guards basically step into the game to stop him, which is pretty ironic because this is like the second time now that they've saved his life. Now, one of the more interesting oh, fuck. Oh, shit. Ugh. Right, if any of you are clueless to what just happened, a bird just flew straight into my glass. And he like knocked himself out. So I had to like pick him up and take him out to the front of the house. But he's awake now. He just flew off and stuff. He's fine. It's always so scary when that happens because you think like, are they just going to like break their neck and just die? But no, he seemed to be completely fine. Yeah. Oh, that was... Now, okay. Back on track after the bird incident. One of the most interesting groups in this episode was actually the Thanos Orbiter, and then the other guy who's basically also kind of a Thanos Orbiter at this point. They did actually play off each other really well, even though the Thanos Orbiter at this point is just he's basically wrote as a Disney villain with how much of a psychopath he is. I get it with the writing. The entire point is he's taken so many of Thanos's drugs, his brain has just been absolutely fried, which by the way, is I don't know what drug he's taking, but the fact that he's like turned into a psychopath within the span of like 3 days, that is really impressive. And also the old guy and the psychic woman, and they kind of like worm their way to safety, especially that she finds the exit and she claims that it's, you know, from the gods. There's even a moment as well where she's completely on her own and she's saying like, thank you gods and stuff. So she believes what she hears and what she sees. It's not like she's just doing this big act to try and like, you know, gain respect from people. Now, one of the saddest groups to watch this episode consisted of the old woman, the pregnant woman, and the trans woman. Now, the writing around the trans character just absolutely kills me because she's basically just the equivalent of like Korean John Wick. I think I remember in season 2, she talked about having a past, like actually being in the military and stuff like that. But at one point, the pregnant lady, her ankle actually ends up getting fractured. Now, obviously, the pregnant woman inside a Squid Game, she's going to give birth. We saw this coming a mile away. Why would you have a woman that's pregnant and she doesn't give birth? She does. It's emotional. The baby is completely CGI. Now, I do want to focus here on the trans woman because she acts like John Wick a lot throughout the show, but here she goes into like overdrive John Wick, which kind of sets off your spidey senses thinking she's gonna get killed this episode, isn't she? And unfortunately she does. She gets like 2 confirmed kills before that, basically killing more than anyone else in this game. And there's one point where she finds the exit on her own and she's like, I can escape. She opens the door and then she, you know, she has a conscience and she's like, no, I need to go get the old woman and the pregnant lady and the CGI baby. And you know, as soon as that happens, like she's dead. Like, you know, she goes in, she opens the door and it's like, guys, I found the and then just like, you know, stabbed from behind. Like I saw it coming a mile away. And again, that's one thing I've noticed a lot in this show. When a character has a lot of screen time or they do something like really badass, they're probably about to get killed 5 minutes later. Also, the face-off between the son and the mother character was just like painfully predictable. Even with the circumstances of like time running out, I just knew that this would happen, that they would be put on different teams. You know, you got the son going around who's this bumbling idiot. He tries to kill someone and then he can't do it. And then someone else comes in and kills the other guy for him. So he's still stuck in the game and he's just wandering around with this knife going, ooh. So yeah, the mother ends up killing the son. Now, episode 2, a lot happened. So what happens next? Not a lot happens. This isn't even a Squid Game problem. It's just a problem with like most shows in general. When they have like this huge set piece or some scene, there almost needs to be this episode of nothing happening just to keep budget in check or to go over what's happened. Now, one new set of characters they introduce is this year's VIPs. If you remember in season 1 of Squid Game, it was basically just all these Europeans, Americans, white people for the most part that spoke English. And oh, bruh, their voices in season 1, it was basically like when you switch to the English dub of Squid Game, but they were just actual people. Now, I'm not sure what kind of angle they're going with here. Maybe it's meant to parody other countries, because if that's the case, they're doing a really good job. But the introduction of the VIPs in this season, it's exactly the same. They just have the most exaggerated, over-exaggerated cringe accents. But I guess that's kind of the point, because Squid Game is talking a lot about like capitalism and how, you know, money le bad, le rich people le bad. I mean, it's basically another show where one of the main bad guys has a very thick British accent. Now, some of the subplots here are actually fairly interesting. Like, for example, you've got the boat people, you know, the detective and stuff, actually trying to find the island. And then you've got that soldier woman as well, who was employed by the Squid Game, and she's trying to escape the island. It's just like, we're not at the season finale yet. We're at the midpoint, so they're not really going to do anything insane this episode, and you're kind of fully aware of that as well. But the boat guys do actually get a pretty big breakthrough. Like, for example, with Korean Mark Wahlberg. He confirms his suspicion that the boat owner, the captain, is actually part of the Squid Games. Because if you remember in season 2, there was this big reveal that the boat captain who was ferrying them around, he's purposely misdirecting them so they don't find the island, even killing one guy in season 2 to cover his tracks. One of the people finds out that he's actually working with the bad guys, but then he gets arrested by the police. And then there's this fight as well with like a really bad CGI dog. There's actually a lot of CGI in this season. I mean, there was CGI in pretty much all the seasons, but so far you've got CGI dog, CGI baby. And even though I think Squid Game itself, it's a great concept, it's a great idea, it's still Netflix that's involved. And to be fair, I don't actually know a single show where Netflix has had like above average CGI. The problem is, I feel like the storyline with the woman that's working with the Squid Game that kind of wants to escape, and then the plot line with the people on the boat and how they're trying to find the island, it's just only really brought up when there's not really much else to talk about. And I get it, you know, the entire point of watching this is for a huge payoff. But again, it's like we've been watching these people go about their business for like, well, basically a whole season. So, you know, the fact that there's not really that much of a payoff, it is really disappointing. And also, you don't want to get stuck with that problem as well, well, where like you set up such hype for a payoff. There is no physical possible way that that payoff is going to be worth it. Now, one of the biggest reveals in this episode is, if you remember the old woman that killed her son to escape the game, she is so racked with guilt that she basically hangs herself. The guards walk in with a coffin. You're wondering what's happened. Could it be Gi-hun? Like could he be super depressed? And then, you know, it cuts and you see the body, jaw drop moment, soy face. Now, this is one of the problems I have with the deaths in this show. They're coming so fast and quick that there's not really that much time to actually process it. I get it. We're kind of very close to the end now. There has to be some big things that happen. But I don't know. I feel like this was such a side note character. Together, the son and the mom, they had great chemistry, but individually, they're not really supporting characters on their own, which kind of makes sense as to why when the son died, the mother died shortly after. I mean, personally, I'm much happier that she was killed off and removed from the show, because she didn't really have that much kind of character on her own. And also, they could have done some really cringe stuff here. They could have wrote like an arc where, you know, oh, she's got the taste for blood now. She is evil. Thankfully, they didn't do anything like that. Now, episode 4, one of the worst criticisms I have is just the tone for it. There's this rope game they play, and a lot of the deaths on it are just kind of played like for comedic effect almost. You know, they're timed to music or whatnot, and contestants pulling funny faces. This happens a lot in shows, by the way. You know, when they have that like musical montage where like a lot of stuff gets achieved, but in Squid Game, it's just people dying. I think you can use dramatic irony in Squid Game, definitely, or like a little bit of satire, because a lot of it is a satire, really. It's a hyperbole of like how our society is with capitalism. But it just feels like with this one, they kind of missed the mark a little bit. Now, Gi-hun, like, by the way, we've only got 2 episodes left. He finally wakes up out of his depressive coma. You know, he was kind of less sad after Le Revolution Le failed. Now, I do keep ribbing on him a lot here. Like, I know the reason he went into this state, apart from everything failing, is his best friend was basically shot right in front of him. Now, he basically snaps out of his coma, and he stops this other player from pushing people over the edge once they finish the bridge game. He also gouges his eye out at one point, which is just like, I was not expecting that. And literally 5 minutes after this, we end up having like another main character kill himself, which was the mother of the CGI baby. And this should be like a really sad scene. You've got this child that was like born, and they're not gonna have a mother. That's really sad. It's really hard to focus on how serious this should be when there's just so much whiplash here of like tonal shifts. But with her dead now, Gi-hun is again completely on his own. His entire group has basically been wiped out. Now, Squid Game as a whole, like season 1 to 3, they tend to do 2 things. They'll either have an episode dedicated entirely to a game, or they have a game that lasts about a quarter of the episode, so the other 3 quarters can be, you know, used to de-stress or character development. This is one of those episodes. Now, this is actually the longest episode in the season, because it's around like 1 hour and 6 minutes. I mean, you've got the rope swing game, the dinner, the interrogation, the island escape scene. That all happens within 1 episode. I'll be honest, I've said that this season has been like kind of all over the place, but this episode is really well paced. There's a lot that happens, but it doesn't feel like we're jumping from plot point to plot point. Now, obviously, we've got the situation with the baby, and a lot of people saw this coming a mile away. I did as well. 2 outcomes were going to happen. The baby was just going to be removed and they wouldn't do anything, or the baby was going to be put as a player into the game. It's the latter. Of course, it was the latter. Now, this is where like the last remaining people are just absolute psychopaths. They basically want to kill the baby, because if the baby dies, then they get more money split between them, because that's one less person getting that money. And also, I'm not really sure what a baby can do with all that money. Just become boss baby or something. And I get it. Some of the last people to survive, they're desperate. They're degenerates. But it's still a little bit forced that they all just kind of think, should we kill a baby? I actually have no ethical morals anymore after joining this game. You know, it's like how you boot up like Fallout or something and you just make every bad choice just on purpose to see what happens. But that's actually a real character in the show. Now, the main drama of this episode actually takes place on the boat. Mr. Park, who is the fisherman, he's basically told that Korean Mark Wahlberg broke into his house, and they've found out that he's part of the Squid Game, prompting him and his other guy to basically kill everyone on board. Now, the ex-police officer, he does kill the captain, and then him and the other guy that didn't die in the shootout basically debate on whether or not they want to find the island, you know, since the fact that their entire crew just got wiped out. I mean, oh, you know what we could do? Squid Game Season 4. We go back to the mainland, get another boat captain who's also sus, and then a whole new crew so we could do it again. Now, this was obviously the payoff that people were waiting for, well, basically since like midway of Season 2. Is the payoff worth it? it was a payoff. It was a good scene. I really enjoyed it. But again, I know a lot of people are just going to roll their eyes expecting it because that side plot, that B story has kind of been dragged out so much. It's a bit difficult to make it worthwhile for some people. But who cares? You're a Netflix viewer. You're probably on your phone anyway. Now, much like the finale of the first season, all the remaining contestants, they're at a feast and they're basically told that the next game will have some strange rules. They need to vote on 3 players to be eliminated and then the rest will survive. You don't know what the game is, but you're kind of interested on how it'll be executed. Now, it's really clear from the offset, Gi-hun, the CGI baby, and the Thanos Orbiter are all going to get voted out. There's a scene with all the other players discussing this and figuring out how much money they'll split between them if they survive, which is 7.6 billion won. There's one really good scene as well where you can see like the old guy and his face drops a bit. He looks a bit panicked and then he immediately tries to, regain his composure. Because if you remember earlier, it's revealed that he's actually in 10 billion won of debt. And so the prize pool means that he's actually 2.4 billion won short. So even after all of this, surviving all of this tragedy, he's still going to be in debt. And because of that, you think, okay, he might be a little bit mischievous, maybe a little bit of backstabbing because he still has more to kind of gain here. But there is a big twist because as we know, the front man has a very special interest in Gi-hun. It seems that the only reason he wants to keep doing these games is to mess with Gi-hun. So he ends up giving Gi-hun a knife to kill the other contestants, specifically when they're sleeping so he can save himself and the baby. Now, after hearing this, I was really, really worried that the main confrontation would be like, Gi-hun and then the front man. And it would be something like, I made this whole game to show you that I can make anyone crack under pressure. You killed people that weren't defending themselves in their sleep. You're evil now. I was really worried that they were going to kind of go down that route. Now, in season 2, you might remember that the front man was actually player 001. Not the old man from the first season, but this younger guy in the second season. Gi-hun didn't know this, but here it's actually revealed that he was player 1. I would also like to point out as well the actor that plays the front man and player 1 in season 2. He was actually in a Gangnam Style video. Okay, not Psy Gangnam Style, not the OG video, but he did another music video and he makes a cameo for like 2 seconds. Just wanted to point that out. Also, the apple pen guys in that video. Oh, God. We're going back to like 2016 YouTube now. Now, some of the framing of this episode, I don't really agree with. It's really obvious that because we're nearing the end, they're trying some new things, but it just comes across as a little bit like kind of tacky. They've got this 4-way split and then later on this 8-way split, and it feels really out of place, especially for Squid Game. But here you feel everything building up for this pinnacle. It's really exciting. They've done a really good job and brought all these plot threads together pretty coherently, to be fair. I also forgot to mention the escaping the island subplot. The guy gets off, but the woman soldier goes back to fight because they're threatening to kill the guy's daughter. I mean, again, not really much to say there. Now, episode 5 is one of those episodes that takes place mostly within a game, which is, by the way, the more interesting episodes. But it does start off with the knife cliffhanger we had because Gi-hun's got this knife. Is he going to use it? And we also learn at one point that the front man, when he was also a player, was actually given the same choice that Gi-hun is being given now. So as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, I see. Gi-hun's going to be trained to be the new front man. Last of Us 2 Neil Druckmann cycle of violence. But just as Gi-hun is about to kill one of the people, he surprisingly has a flashback of Sebyok, who was one of the female characters from like the very first season. You know, the girl that everyone was making like fan edits of on TikTok. I can imagine some people finding this cheap, especially with like how many characters are reoccurring. You've got Thanos and his orbiter, the girl with the nose ring, the guy going through withdrawals. The old guy from season 1 was like taxidermied. But I think it makes these 2, well, technically 3 seasons a lot more interconnected. Since pretty much everyone died, the only person that's holding the entire show together as a consistency is Gi-hun. It's kind of like how in The Walking Dead, everyone died or fell off, so all you had left was like Norman Reedus, who went to go do Death Stranding, and then Carol as well. But again, like, no one's watching The Walking Dead past season 2. Come on, what are you doing? Bro, watch The Walking Dead. I promise. After episode 120, it gets so much better. I said that the escaping the island subplot actually did end up being pushed back a bit, but that is nowhere more apparent than this episode. And keep in mind, this is the second last episode of the entire show. But in fairness, we did get some kind of happenings, even though nothing ever happens. The soldier woman actually ends up killing a lower ranked frontman, and then they have this whole kind of like back and forth between each other. The elevator transition they have as well was actually like, that was pretty cool. I like that. Now, following this segment, we actually get 5 different cutaways, and each one lasts 30 seconds, just showing that what she's been up to. I I feel like if all of these scenes were bunched together, it would have made a lot more sense. But I can understand why they kind of kept it so short, so concise, so it doesn't really interact with the final game too much. So the final game, the final Squid game, the final QUID game, is it any good? Basically, there's 3 pillars. Each pillar needs one person to be pushed off of so everyone can survive. But again, this revolves like around the feast. It's just a bunch of people conspiring against our protagonist Gi-hun and then CGI baby. So they basically agree that, you know, if we kill Gi-hun, the good boy protagonist, if we kill the baby as well, we still have to kill someone else. So the dilemma is they need a death on each pillar, but they can't waste 2 deaths on one pillar. And then also, obviously, as well, you have the Thanos Orbiter, who's now going through withdrawals because he can't get any more drugs. And he's basically dead weight, so he has about as much respect with the remaining contestants than Gi-hun does. Now, they keep debating for a while, you know, the ethics and the morals and the reasoning for wanting to push people off or how they're going to do it. And it's interesting to see how the final contestants' minds work, or more don't work. You know, they can vote on who they're going to kill, but then no one might actually want to go through with it. And I think it's really interesting because a lot of the final contestants, they are just cowards. They're cowards that basically hid, or they lied, or they got lucky. These aren't like larger than life personalities, but some of them are just, yeah, they're just worms. I do like the fact as well that there's a couple of people that actually try to trick Gi-hun into walking away from the ledge. And keep in mind, Gi-hun has been aura farming a lot this season, mostly just not speaking, just kind of brooding. And he basically completely evaporates their minds and sends them back into a crying mess over just a couple of words. They try a couple of tactics to bait, but as you can expect, too much aura. The entire group just ends up breaking down. Gi-hun also reveals that he has a knife. Player 333 also reveals that he's the baby's father, and then he ends up leaving the main group. There's a fight that breaks out, and only 5 players are left. Gi-hun, the baby, player 333, the old man, and then this other character that the group beat to an absolute pulp in an attempt to throw him off the ledge. So player 333 ends up, you know, game ending the old guy. I mean, honestly, good riddance, because that guy, like, I do not know any redeemable traits that old guy had apart from I am in Ledette. That was it. The guy was just a complete coward through and through. The guy who was beaten to a pulp kind of realizes that he was meant to be the sacrifice, and he just like game ends himself. And all this does is leaves Gi-hun, player 333, and the CGI baby. And obviously we cannot have all of this absolute cinema without a Rick and Morty B story. In Rick and Morty, you'd have Summer going on her phone or something like that. And here we've got the Escape the Island subplot. There's this like really bad stormtrooper tier fight between the escaping players and some guards when they're on boats. They keep spraying and praying. You know how gunfights work in shows like this, because usually a gunfight would require tactics. It'd require flanking, or it'd be over in seconds. No, instead, it's just a kind of spray and pray, blind fire, hoping things happen. The green screens here and the CGI, it's Netflix tier. I'm not going to say it's bad. It's Netflix tier. It kind of comes with the subscription. Same goes with the pillars as well. I mean, they don't look great. They kind of stick out, and they've been quite heavily weathered. And just as the escaping player is about to get killed, something might happen. The plot armor kicks in. And then the boat carrying the ex-cop and his friends show up, and they kill the guards. Now, the problem is, it only seems like things are actually happening now with that subplot. And keep in mind, the final episode is only around 55 minutes. You know, we've got a lot of subplots here. Korean Mark Wahlberg storming the island. What's going to happen with the final 3 players? So, is the finale of Squid Game good? No, it is not. And that's really disappointing, because the season overall, it was a mixed bag, but pretty solid. So player 333 and Gi-hun end up having this face off, because obviously, you know, you can't really have a CGI baby fighting for its life. They both roll off the edge. Gi-hun holds on. Player 333 dies pretty early. And Gi-hun is basically crowned the victor of Squid Games once again. I mean, we saw this coming. Like, he wasn't going to die. The guy's got like 7 layers of plot armor on him. The only problem is the button for the game wasn't actually pressed, meaning that player 333's death didn't actually count for the pillar. So now either Gi-hun has to die or the baby has to die. Now, remember about 15 seconds ago, I made the point that he has about 7 layers of plot armor on. He takes all of that plot armor off and basically sacrifices himself. Gi-hun's death is one of the worst decisions they have made with this show. I'm not saying you didn't have to kill him off. I'm not saying that. He doesn't have to survive. There doesn't have to be a happy ending. I mean, he went into the games with the hopes of breaking everything down, because this wasn't to compete again or to get money. This was solely for revenge. And then he basically just ends up saving the life of CGI baby. And also to find out as well that the games, they just kind of packed up and moved on. It is such a spit in the face for like viewers that have been watching this show for, I think it's been about 3 years now. And they do this whole bit of like, oh, but the Coast Guard might get there in time and find them. But yeah, Gi-hun dies. You expect some kind of, you know, some big reveal like, haha, I had a grenade vest all along and he blows up the whole island. But no, nothing. Like, it's a really sad death and it's just a total victory for the bad guys. His death was basically for nothing and he just shouldn't have competed in the show again. It's like in season 1, Gi-hun, desperate, goes into the Squid Game, gets the money, wins. Season 2, he wants to get revenge on them for everything they've done to him. He wants to break down the entire game. It's this like anti-capitalist statement. And then it's like, you know, the entire philosophy behind this is basically just, yep, sometimes, sweetie, the bad guys win. I mean, we can talk about the side characters as well. The soldier woman escapes, so does the ex-cop, and they all kind of, you know, reconnect with their families. The ex-cop looks after his baby. The Korean Mark Wahlberg guy gets out of prison. But again, like, you don't care. It's just so overshadowed by this decision to kill Gi-hun. It's just such an awful choice. Like, I do not understand why they did it. Like, the problem is as well, I feel this was a corporate decision, because I get it. I made the quote earlier, like, you know, capitalism never goes away, like money le bad, rich people le bad, all that kind of stuff. But then what they do at the end of this season, they do a teaser for American Squid Game, which again, it just feels like a corporate shill. Like, oh great, now we get Squid Game, but then we get like a Logan Paul character. Oh my god, I'm so excited for that. The reason why Squid Game did so well is because it was set in Korea. It was unique. It was interesting. You don't get a lot of media that actually jumps continents like that. And usually if it does, we completely ruin it. I mean, a great example, Old Boy, this film that came out, Korean film, insane film. And then Americans had to remake it with Josh Brolin. It's just absolute dog shit. And they're basically doing the exact same thing here. And I think Josh Brolin is an amazing actor. Like in No Country for Old Men, he killed it. But like at the same time, it's just not everything needs an American remake or some kind of like American intervention. So overall, I think season 3, definitely worth watching. But again, it's one of those shows that just like the ending is so lame. It almost removes all the goodwill and all the good experiences you had. It's not Game of Thrones bad, okay, because there's nothing worse than the Game of Thrones ending, but it's definitely up there, like the top 5 at least.